Hello, welcome. I'm Commissar Marek, and today we are going to take a look at custom events and how you can use them on your maps as a map maker. So this video is going to be next in line as a video for tips and tricks for or tutorial for map making in Season 3, specifically Augustus. You cannot make use of this for Julius, nor can you really play maps made for Augustus in Julius or Vanilla. So we are here in the map that I showed you before when I talked about terrain and basics of map making, and today we are going to take a look at Augustus event system. All this can be done through an XML file as well, which I will tell you the path of right now. So you go into your C3 folder and you would be going into your editor. And there is in C3 Augustus, if you've installed it in your C3 folder, there is a folder called editor. You double click it and there is a folder that's called events. And then there is a folder called messages. And so you can go into messages and then you could create your own custom messages to pop up to the player as when you stipulate when. But also you could go into events and you can do all of this, which we'll talk about here, through XML file. You can also import and export from the game itself. I'm going to show you how. So if you are a person who likes to code or work with the XML file instead of the UI in game, you can also use the XML. For me personally, I don't like using XML more than absolutely necessary. And so as I talked about before on custom empires, there it's necessary. There is no UI for it. But for events, you can use in-game UI. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And so you click over here, and now in Augustus you have scenario events and custom messages here, okay? And so what we will do is, let's click on scenario events. And so this is an event system. There is this, which is custom variables. I will explain custom variables, possibly if there is time at the end of this video, but most likely I'm gonna explain it properly in a different video. If I feel like it, we'll see. It is more complex thing to get into, but it is tied into how events work. So what are events? Basically, if you've ever made maps in a different editor in a game like Age of Empires 2, you've got triggers, right? So each event is like a trigger in Age of Empires 2 editor, and so we can create an event. And so each event, which is this tab, we can create multiple. You see they stack one under each other and they show you how many conditions and actions they have. And so each one is like an enclosed thing by itself. And so each one handles a different sort of thing, action you want it to do. And you can set up conditions for it. So each trigger or event, which is this one, this is event 0, this is event 1. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as many as you want. And so each one contains conditions and actions in it. So let's take a look at it. So if we click on it, it's gonna open up scenario event, and ID is 0 for this one. And it currently does not repeat, and there's no repeating function here. We can set it up pretty easily, but so for something relatively simple, what we can start with as with the events and how to explain them is, for example, a system where player would get penalized for each time they are in tab. Okay, so there is already a system of favor loss in game, but for the sake of explaining and how to do that for me, I can show you this. It's going to be a simple example. Alternatively, I think I might actually start with a sort of a different function which is more cool and more people might make use of something like this. So let's say we would want a city that's not gonna have any local food, and instead what you would want is each month players gonna receive set amount of food into their granaries if they are open, if they have open space to accept these goods, okay? So what you'd do is add a condition over here, and so we would only start it after 1 month has passed, and so minimum and maximum. So how we would set this up, let's say, okay, so let's set this up a little bit differently, because 1 month would be like, I cannot properly explain how that would work if we only had it in 1 month. Let's say that each half a year, which means 6 months, player is gonna receive like a bulk of food and then they have to live from that food for the rest of the year, okay? And so what we would do is we would check that time has passed. These are conditions, okay? So condition list, if you click on it and time passed, so you can make it a condition that buildings are in a certain area. I'm gonna show you how that works as well, or how much city health there is, how much money the city has, how much population is in the city. And so these things can be the trigger, basically, the condition, which means that when the player achieves this or certain amount of time passes, then the actions in this trigger or event can happen. And so we would set this, as I said, half a year, so minimum of 6 months and maximum of 6 months. So after 6 months, if you set this to be like, if you wanted to have an RNG element to it, you could set it so that it's between 6 and 12 months, and it would fire randomly at months 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12, okay? But usually I like to eliminate RNG, so I have it as this. And what we want to do is, so this is just so that it doesn't spam player immediately with the event when they start the map, but after 6 months have passed in the map, they'll receive their first shipment, and so this condition needs to be achieved in order for this trigger to, or event to fire. Okay, and we would set this to be, if you set it to equal, which means first time, the time reaches 6. This is in months always, so 6 is 6 months. 1 year would be 12, 2 years, 24, etc. Okay, so if you want it to be very long, you would, for example, 6 days, 10 years. So if you wanted to fire only once, then you would have this as equal, because if it's more than this, it would not fire again. This condition would not be fulfilled because it's more than 6. But we can take a look at this and say that if it's greater or equal than this, which means that it fires when it's 6 and then it can fire again whenever, okay? So we set this to be like that, and then we would say that there needs to be a period of 6 months between repeats, and it can repeat infinitely. We could also say it only repeats 60 times, for example, but we can just let it repeat infinitely. And so when 6 months have passed, then this event can fire, and then it can also repeat after another 6 months has passed, and afterwards it can go again and again, but each time it needs to fulfill the 6 month delay. Now, we set up a condition, but we haven't set up an action yet. So let's click on add action, and we would go down here and we would do change resource stockpiles for wheat, and we would say that player receives 64 wheat, and we will respect storage settings. This is just, you can also set it only granaries, for example, because the thing with food, if you don't set this up correctly, what would happen is player could get swamped if you don't respect his storage. Then if he has a warehouse with free space, even if he doesn't accept wheat, the game would deposit the wheat in there. Okay, so instead what we want to do is specify that only granaries are targeted, and that only granaries that have this accepted will actually receive the wheat, and it's just gonna magically appear there each 6 month period, and then they can do whatever they want with it. But just one type of food wouldn't be enough usually, so we would set up a change resource stockpiles for fish, for example, and also 64 respect for granaries, and only depositing granaries and respect their settings. And so if player has 4 granaries available for accepting these goods, at each half a year they'll receive a free shipment of this food, right? Now, how would you let player know that this is a thing that happened? Unless, they will visually see it happen, but if you want a pop-up, what you can do is you can add a new action. Each time this will repeat. Let's go down here and see show custom message. And now we need to, I would have to create a messages file, which you need to do that through XML. I might show you how that's done, but first I'm gonna just quickly go back and custom messages, and I'm gonna use just one of my files here. So for example, let's just use my custom messages file from when I made the Gothic map. And so you have scenario briefing, okay? So this is a custom message that pops up, and usually you explain things down here, and it's always good to let players know what the current objective is and what they need to achieve in order to progress, right? And So now we have all these messages that I set up. I will show you how to do that, because again, if you just start let things happen, none of the players will actually know what's happening. Only you know it. So that's where the custom messages come in, for you to be able to tell them what's happening, what's their objectives, what are they aiming towards, and what's gonna happen when they do it. Sometimes you might want to keep some things hidden from the player, but it's usual that you really want to give player as much information as necessary. So let's go back into scenario events where we left off. You see that now we see there's one condition and 3 actions in this trigger or this event. We click on it, we show the custom message, and we pick the message. And this time, for example, the briefing would pop up when this effect fires. And that's the event for the wheat, or for the food setup. What you can do as well is, for example, let's say that we want a new trigger, new event, which I added down here. This is the one which I added at the start. So let's do a condition, and we would say when city population reaches its more than equal, always add greater than equal, because otherwise, if someone has more than this population, they would not get this event. They would have to have exactly that amount, and that's very hard to do. So greater than or equal means that if they achieve it or surpass it, they'll have this fire. And we would say that when they achieve 7,500 people or more, we can also say that only patricians are counted, or only plebeians, or only small land dwellers, which is low-level housing. People who live in that would be counted. So when city population is greater or equal than 7,500, we would have an action that will, for example, you can start an invasion, but currently only natives. If you don't click on this button, it will crash the game. Currently in this version of Augustus, you can add how much, up to 200 size, or 200 is a normal invasion schedule as I showed you before, but in this you can only have 150, and you can set from which invasion point they come. You cannot set it random, and you can set the target, but don't click on the enemy type or this, because it will crash the game, and you will lose all progress unless you saved, okay? So, but instead of the invasion, what we want to do, for example, is we would like to change local resources available. So suddenly the player could have access to wheat and set it to be true, produced through, which means that now it's available. If you wanted to have it so that when 7,500 people are living in the city and suddenly player will lose access to some resource, you can also do that by setting it to false, and if it's available at the start, the event will go and disable that resource from the player, but we want it to be enabled after they attain this. Also, I would usually add an event and tell them with a message that this has happened, so we would create a message, and then we'd go here, find the message in question, and we would set it up so that it fires when this happens and tells player that something happened, like wheat got unlocked. You can also create an event chain, like for example, if you wanted to lock a player from completing the map before they build a certain building, like for example, let's set condition, and this condition would be that active count of building type. So we would say that if player has less than 1, which means 0 or no building like this, and we would want them to construct any Grand Temple, or we could do Mercury Grand Temple, for example. We want them to build Mercury Grand Temple. So how we would set that up is we would count that player has less than 1 Mercury Grand Temple. We would say that this event can repeat every month, and what happens if player does not have a Mercury Grand Temple is that they would, for example, adjust rating. Let's see. We can only adjust favor. We can only adjust. So we would adjust favor by -10, and we would also set condition. So when player has favor and he would have more than 80, let's say that our map would have a requirement to win when favor is at 95, so 15 from 80 basically. So 95 would be the goal, and we say that this event will take a look at your favor each month, and when it's more than 80 you will lose 10 of it, or you can lose 15 of it to make sure. Also, when you want to subtract, just hit the minus and then count in the number. That's how that works. And so each month the game will take a look at the player, and if they haven't built a Grand Temple to Mercury, and if they have more than 80 favor, they'll lose 15 of it. Okay, and that's just to prevent players from winning before they actually do that temple. And so suddenly when the player will have the Temple to Mercury, this will no longer be able to fire, and they can now complete the map and attain the higher favor. Okay, so this is how we would limit a player in a way until they do a thing that you want them to do. But as with everything else, let them know that this is what you want them to do, because players will have no idea that you want them to do this. You have to know. Okay, they have to know that you wanted them to do this, otherwise they'll just not know what's causing them to lose things like that, and so that can be very frustrating. So always use the custom messages. I'm gonna touch upon the custom messages towards the end of this video, just to show you how to set that up and how to actually verify it and preview it in game and how to set it up, and it can lead to some very interesting design. So let's take a look at the events again. So I'm gonna take a look at another trigger. So let's add a condition, and in this instance we could, for example, say that we would set up an event that would take a look at player taxation, and if they tax more than equal to, if they tax more than 10% or 10% exactly, it's gonna lose them some money. They'll get fined minus 500 denarii. And we would also tell them with a message that this has happened, because otherwise they would not know, and set it to repeat every month, or you can make it so so it can fire 4 times per year, so every 3 months this could happen. And so this would be a fine for the player to exceed a certain limitation you set up for them. But always tell them that this is in the game, but this is what you can do now. Okay, and so I'm gonna also show you an event. For example, we could set up an example where you see when I hover my mouse over the terrain, you see the number at the very top. Right here there's the minimap, the 2 buttons, and then grass, medium brush, and this is the 0 offset. This is the coordinates, okay? And it's only one coordinate for each tile. It's not Y and Z, it's or X and Y. It's actually just one number for every tile in game. And so you see when I move the mouse around, it's changing, okay? You see it? It's kind of small, but yeah. So we would say that in this middle of this farmland, so that would be 13,066. That's the coordinates ID of this tile specifically. So I would take my pen and paper, usually, I have it right here, and I would say, I would write down 13,066, and then we would go into events, and we would set up a new event. And this event would be having a condition. This condition would be that we would have buildings in area and grid offset. So this is where it is, right? We saw the offset number here, so 13,066, and with a radius of, this is amount of tiles, so for example 10 tiles from the middle of this, so that would cover the whole farmland. And if the player has, in a radius of 10 around this central point, a building that is a farm. Let's take a look at it. Sometimes it's not, some of it is alphabetically sorted, but some of it is not, all farms. So if a player has any farm in this area, and we could check that it's more than 1, but we could also set it that it's more than, for example, 8. If they really are efficient and have more than 8 in here, what would happen then, this is a condition now, and we would check an action, and now what could happen is we could, for example, say that we could, this is very rude, but we could do this, building force collapse, and so we would set this to 13,066 and the radius of 10, and we would say buildings, any buildings, so all farms, all engineers posts, all prefectures, everything that would be constructed in that radius of 10 around here would destroy, be collapsed forcefully. And this could happen only once, or you could set it to happen every, let's say we would want it to happen every 3 years. So it could repeat every 3 years up to infinite amount, and so when players build more than 8 farms here, it would force all their buildings around here to collapse, but not any further, right? So that's how that would work. It's what I mean. I'm just showing you the possibilities, right? So this video should show you all the things that are possible, because this allows you to effectively do so many things that were just impossible before with the editor tools. And so now you can calculate and judge the city and the player's progression, and then set up events for it accordingly, unlock new resources, or have a chain of events that progressively unlocks them to be able to tax more and things like that. Some of it will require custom variables, so I will show you how that works as well. It's a little bit more complicated. I promise that I will show you that at the end or in the next video. I think we can do it today. So first I'm gonna see if I can find an example and create a custom messages file with you, and then show you how that works in game. And then we'll at the very end take a look at how the custom variables work, okay? Okay, so I'm back and let's take a look. So I created a very basic file that is going to be custom messages file, and this is what you can use. I'm gonna link it in Discord, I'm gonna share it in Discord, where you can just get this example and work from it as I will show you here, and create a functional file for you without any sort of presets. This is just a very basic minimum for this to be a message file, and so I'm gonna explain how we go through it from the top. So this is just a version of the XML. By the way, I'm using Visual Studio Code, the software. So this is what I'm using for this. Also using a view of World Wrap so that I can see long lines of code. You can also use any other software that reads XML, by the way, so whatever you prefer. I just use this. So we have messages version, what kind of language it is, so English, message UI. This is what the ID of this message is, so we can have multiple messages. You will see that later. So for this first one is the intro, which is always the first one on every map. You want to introduce players to what your rules and and the settings are, okay? So we would say that it's intro. You can modify this, so we could also say it's tutorial. And title of this would be example. You could also say that the title would be something else, like for example, teaching tips and tricks, and subtitle is what's going to be below it, and that's going to be learning how to use custom messages. And so what I'm going to show you now is we could set up a text. This is where I just wrote text here so that I don't forget where it's supposed to be. So between text and text with a slash before it is when the actual message, the main contents of it are going to be displayed. And I left this, I don't know how this is called in English. It's what you use in email, this thing, or whatever, it's this. So and G is code for adding pictures into your messages. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and show you. So if we go ahead and go into custom messages, I'm gonna use Verby's Verona, which is a map he made where I can go down here and see resource pictures, or we could do God pictures. So we, for example, want to add a God picture to this message. We would find 55 is a number for Mars, and so we'd go back, and G55 would be displaying Mars's picture in this message, and then we would want to add text. Hello to all new map makers for Caesar 3 Augustus. And this is going to be our message, and then this is the end of the message as the text ends and then message ends. We could also go ahead, I'm going to just grab it from my other file here. So we could, for example, say we want this to play a sound from the game files. There are only a certain amount of files in the game. You can also add your own music, but well, that is a reason of copyright and such. So, it's on you, but you can do that. Just name something, drop that in a file in MP3 or WAV in your community folder, which you could find in your CZ3 folder. You can find community, and you would do audio, and your audio is here, and also you can have video over here. So this is how that is. And so what I would want to do in this example is just grab this from my other file and just put it behind the text over here, and media sound it's gonna play a sound which is a fanfare. Okay. Number 2, WAV. This is from the WAVs. You can go ahead and see what the WAVs are. If you open your C3 folder, go to WAVs, and this is all the sounds from the game. So click on Ballista. Okay, so you can find every single voice line, every single thing in here, and so you can make the game play it in your custom thing. So I want to save this. I want to save it as in my custom messages, and we want to save it as example messages. Okay, and we save it, and we would go into the game, and now we would go into custom messages, import, and we would now, this is scanning my C3 folder, message to custom and messages, and now we want to find that example we just made, example messages XML. We click, do you see that now we have the message here? We only have one because we only added one, and that is tutorial. We click on tutorial, and if I had all music on, it would also play the fanfare noise, but I have it off for the purpose of this video. I can turn it on momentarily if you want to. And now you see the teaching tips and tricks is what is over here. So the displays as title, which is correct. Learning how to use custom messages is the subtitle, which we have over here. Then we have the picture of the Mars, which is here. And then we have the text we added as meat and potatoes. So for example, for the map in question, we would add every 6 months your city will receive 64 units of wheat and fish if you have free space in your granaries. And so this would let players know what's gonna happen. And we could also just say new objective, for example, and do this. So I'm just gonna do rules category, for example, and then if you want there to be a space like this, it's actually not how that's done. So what you do is add the end and then L, and this makes it one set of space, like a tab basically. So we would want to add a couple, so usually I do 2. So we add this here as well, usually keep a space bar between the text and this, and then we would go down here below that, a new objective, and we would say achieve 7,500 population in your city to unlock new farming resource. You can also tell them it's wheat straight up if you want to. That doesn't really matter. Now, when the message ends, usually it's a good idea to add more of these, just to be sure that it's not cut off at the bottom. If the message is very long, you need to have at least like 4 or 5 of these so that the message does not get cut off, okay? So now I'm gonna save it. You can just use Ctrl S to save if you are using this software, and then go ahead and import the message again. You need to do that to update it, and then we click on it, and you see that we changed this, and now there are spaces between the things, and we have a rule, we have an objective, and now players would be able to understand what we've just implemented with the events, right? And so you can then go ahead, and if you want to add even more messages, so you see that message ends and then the messages file ends down here. What we could do is go ahead and just start copying this whole thing. This is a single message, right? Starting from message and then ending it /message. And we go below this and we add a new one, and we would name this one, for example, wheat. And we would say, this is just for us, the UID is for you, so you know the tutorial message didn't show up, like this text doesn't pop up to the play, it's just for you to orient yourself in this file. So now we add a title, which is new farming techniques. Bountiful harvests. And we would want to add a picture. As I told you before, we could go ahead and take a look at Verona from Fairbuy and go down to the resource pictures and add wheat, which is GN88. And now we would say a message, which would be Solve Governor. Raiders have brought us plentiful seeds to start planting our own grain, right? And so we would say that there is, let's just delete the rules, and then we would go to not new objective, but we would say that new resource unlocked wheat, for example. Or if you have another objective, you can then also add a new line, and as we did here, new objective, and you would say what's the next thing in line for the player to do. Now we would, yeah, let's keep the fanfare and that's fine. Let's save it. Now we will go ahead and take a look at the message. So we import our example. And now we have a message for wheat. And now you see the wheat symbol and what happened, and that happened, right? And so in our events, when we take a look where we set up the event for our wheat, okay, and we have a crash, that can happen. This is why you should save your progress every now and again. If you edit anything specifically, just do that. Now I didn't save myself, so we just lost everything, but that doesn't really matter, because this is just to show you. Right, and so we can go ahead into the map again and quickly create an event, which is gonna be when a condition is fulfilled, which is gonna be of population, city population 7,500 more than or equal, and new action is gonna be allow, or you can also allow buildings, so new farms can be allowed. So now a player can build farms, or you can also make him to be able to now suddenly start building plaza or statues or clinics or hospital. Any building that's here can be locked and unlocked with events as well. So we would say that farms are unlocked and that resource is unlocked. Don't forget that you need to change local resource available. Wheat is true now, so wheat is available on this map. And also new action, which is going to be show custom message, and custom messages go in, import our custom messages, which is going to be example messages and wheat. So custom events, go here, show custom message of wheat, and now when this triggers, it's gonna show player the message, and it's gonna also allow the wheat locally and everything like that. I think this should really explain and show you how to do things like that. You can also use the collapse, by the way, I showed you before, to smash natives. You just need to set that it will look for natives in that little window where it sets certain buildings. You just click native hut or native field, and you can just smash native huts for the player on the map as well. You cannot remove rocks or terrain like that with the events though. So that's something, so you can take a look through the list and really see what it allows. But this should give you a basic overview of what you can do with the custom messages and how to set up a file. And so now if we could go, usually my files have, let's take a look, this is one of my maps. So you see that there are quite a few messages. It looks complicated, but when we started building it up from nothing, you see how simple it is to set up, right? And so even this started as very simple this. So again, you can grab this on Discord if you really want to. I'm gonna make sure I share it there. And I'm gonna show you custom variables as well. So now to show off custom variables, so this is in events, custom variables. You can set up a new custom variable, you can maximum have 100 of them, but that's not really a huge concern. And so we would want to say that set up a new event, but this event would have a caveat. And why are the variables useful is you can use these variables to count specific things or times players in debt or things like that. And then when it happens a certain amount of times, a new action is gonna happen. And you should also, like, you can set up clocks basically and things like that. In order to understand this is slightly more advanced, but it allows for some really good things. Unfortunately for me, I also had issues with this where it causes just, you know, it's very easy to make mistakes with variables. And so when you add them up, double check, triple check that you've set everything correctly, because, well, it tends to just have some unforeseen consequences with the time if you don't set it exactly right. Even a slight, very small mistake could result in not working as intended, right? And so we could set up a new event. Let's create a counter. And so this is gonna be, for example, times player had more than 1,000 denarii. So we can name this, and this is how it starts off. And so we start at 0, we can also start at 1, for example. That's a good starting point. and you can name these triggers or these custom variables, and another which would be custom variable that will be after player received the warning. And so we would set this to start with 1 as well. And so these do nothing by itself. You just named this and set it up, and now you need to tell the game what to when to count it and how. And so we would set up a new event, and we would add an event condition which is gonna be sit in money. So when player has more than or equal than 1,000 denarii, it's gonna do an action where it will modify change custom variable value of custom variable times player had more than 1,000 denarii, and it's gonna add 1. And you can also set it to, so it's gonna always set it to 1, but we want to add 1. So this is how it would work. And so each time player has more than 1,000, it's gonna add 1 number to this, and we set it up so it's looking for that amount, and it could also repeat every month. And we also can add a condition now where the custom variable value, it can be a condition by itself, right? And custom variable value of after player received the value is less than 2. So, it's greater or equal than 2. So if it's more, or if it's 2 or more, it's not gonna play this again. And so this second variable we just added starts at 1. And so we didn't modify any events with that yet, but this one will keep counting this number up and up and up and up each time player had more than 1,000 denarii at the end of a month, right? And so we could add another event chain, which is going to be a condition, which is going to specifically look for custom variable value on that counter, and if it has been 12 or more, it's gonna do an action which is gonna change custom variable value. Let's take a look. And after player received a warning, let's do 2 and set it to, we won't set it, but we'll just, we could set, yeah, let's use it. So when it happens, it's gonna set this value, the custom variable, to 2. And so now suddenly, when it happened, when this happened more than 12 times, or 12 times in total, this event where it counts the money, then suddenly, this would modify this second value we set up, the warning, and then that would mean that this cannot fire again because it requires this second value to be lower than, this needs to be less than 2. So that if it's 1 or 0, it can continue happening, this event with the 1,000. But this is slightly confusing, but this is how it is. So you want it to be like this, where basically it's gonna keep happening. This event has a condition when this second value of after player received warning, which we named the second custom variable, is at 1 or 0, but no more than no 2, no more than 2. And then it's gonna keep happening. And when it happens, this one event, when it happens 12 times, it's gonna modify that second value to 2, which means that it cannot keep counting it, right? And so we disable that count from happening, but we would also set up this one where it finally goes over the 12 times where it happened to also send a message, like set up a new message we would create, and we would say, oh, beware governor, corruption is rampant. If you keep more than X amount of money in your coffers, you will lose some due to corruption, for example, right? And it would create a message that's gonna show up like that. And now we would make sure that player doesn't get spammed with it, but now, after these things happened, we could also set up an event that's gonna look for a condition, which is gonna be custom variable value on the second one. So this could only happen if this was 2 or more. And so from the start of the game, it's not gonna happen until player has been warned about that. For the 12 times consecutively he had more than 1,000 denarii, then he would receive the warning message, and now this new event would keep actually have this condition fulfilled, where it could keep happening every, for example, 6 months, where it would look for that variable value and it would say it's more than 2, and so now player's gonna lose between 200 and 700 denarii, and it's gonna pick a random value between the two numbers, right? And so this could also repeat every half a year, maximum count, so maximum 20 times. That would not happen again. You could add a message to it that it had happened, but it's not good to spam the player all the time, like with a bunch of messages every year. That could be obnoxious. So small things, you don't need to send the player notification about everything like that. But this should tell you the basics and how to use variables. If you have any questions, let me know, and you can join the Discord to get the files, and ask about anything. I can share my stuff you need from what you've seen in this video, and I hope that you learned something, and thank you for watching. See you around. Bye.